watching the dancers of China.
Since our visit to China, that's all he's talking about. Nothing else.
Really, Tuts? What about me? I haven't heard anything yet.
If you really want to hear, Potts and I can take turns to tell you.
Let's do it!
Alright, but first, a touch of geography. The Chinese culture grew for 7,000 years between two rivers, the Yangtze or Yellow River in the north, and the Yangtze, as we call it, in the south. Both flow west to east into the Pacific. Now, the story. For 4 days, we traveled downstream along the southern river over 6,400 kilometers long. Not surprisingly, the Chinese call this the Long River or Changjiang in Mandarin.
We traveled a mere 1,360 kilometers section of this river. From the big hazy city of Chongqing to the smaller city of Wuhan. Our aim was to see the three famous gorges in between. In each gorge, the river becomes narrow, flows swiftly and dangerously as it winds among tall mountains.
2,500 years ago, this area was a part of a small kingdom called the Chu. Marcus Yi or Sangshi Ho was its local ruler. At a museum in Wuhan, we saw a model of his tomb. It was the oldest monument we were to see in our trip. From its 4 chambers, hundreds of bronzes were recovered. Vessels for wine, coolers, braziers, and strange-looking creatures. There are also lacquer works, panels, boxes, and a wooden deer, as well as bowls of gold and military artifacts. There were wind and string musical instruments. The most impressive among these is a complex ensemble made of bronze and stone, capable of playing 5 octaves. When the Marquis died, 21 girl musicians aged 9 to 25 were also buried with him. The dead Marquis needed his musicians even in his afterlife.
That is gruesome, Tut. This guy was evil.
Look, Anjali, our boat is now at the first gorge, the Chitangsha. In the past, these waters were shallow and treacherous. Submerged rocks, fierce rapids, and rock slides destroyed many boats. Traveling up this river is more difficult than climbing to heaven, said Du Fu, a Chinese poet of the 8th century. Today, such rock hazards, destroyers of boats, has been blasted away. Yet the landscape of sheer cliffs and formations are still remembered with names and legends. While traveling in today's safe and fast cruisers, it's hard to believe that this journey was so perilous and slow just decades ago. This dreaded the Chitangsha is only 8 kilometers long, and our cruiser needs just 20 minutes to sail through.
Can we get back to the mean Marcus Yi? I hope he had a miserable afterlife.
Would we ever know? In any case, the kingdom of Chu itself was conquered 220 years later by the king of the Qins to the north. He took over the Chu as well as 5 other kingdoms and merged them all into a single country. It is this country we call China, from the word Qin. The Qin king declared himself emperor, or Qin Shi Huang. So did China get its first emperor. He ruled from Shenyang, his capital, near today's Xi'an. Until recently, this city was called Chang'an. Today's city is nothing like the historic old city. One feature that has been preserved is the city's fortress, which acts like a protective wall common in those days. We climbed to the wall's ramparts and walked about its buildings. Modern Xi'an extends far beyond these huge walls.
What did this first emperor of China actually do?
It was he who started building the Great Wall of China. He joined the walls of the Qin kingdom with the walls of his conquered states. The result was a long protective wall to the north. 4 more walls were built later on by other emperors. Together, in theory, the entire wall is 5,600 kilometers long. Today, only the walls built by the Ming dynasty just centuries ago are in good condition. We got to climb a part of it at Badaling near Beijing. We walked past one watchtower and climbed towards another atop a visible peak. Every day, thousands march up and down this unique landmark in China. It was Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, who thought of the idea.
Was this emperor good to his people?
Not really. Thousands suffered and died working on this wall. It came to be known as the longest graveyard in history. In his quest for power, he was ruthless. Fortunately, his reign was short, just 11 years. He died in 210 BCE. But he still lives in the minds of millions who travel to his incredible monument at Lintong near Xi'an. Millions visit the site today and remember him.
What monument was that?
It was discovered just 30 years ago by a farmer who was digging a well. His shovel hit a buried pit of thousands of soldiers, larger than life, and in full battle formations. All made out of baked clay or terracotta. It was an amazing archaeological treasure of images of soldiers and horses ready for combat. Their beauty is as much in their numbers as in the details. The face, the hair, the armor, and even the footwear of each soldier is unique and skillfully molded. Many finely sculptured bronzes such as war chariots, have also been unearthed. But there is also evidence that much has been broken or destroyed by fire. 2 more pits are still being excavated. Apparently, 700,000 laborers worked for 36 years to create this memorial for the emperor. And like the musicians of Marquis E, the designers of this site were also buried alive within the pits to stop them from making other monuments of this kind.
Here we go again. Were there no laws against cruelty?
There were. 3 centuries before the emperor's time, the revered Confucius, or Confucius as he is better known everywhere, had written down the moral codes of behavior for rulers. But the emperor ignored them and killed off Confucian scholars and burned their books. Neither did he abide by the faith of the time, Taoism, founded by Lao Tzu, yet rejected violence and embraced harmony and love. Buddhism, with its own principles of self-discipline, had not yet reached China.
When did Buddhism get here?
Only in the 2nd century, the Qin dynasty was gone and the Hans were ruling. The Buddhist faith grew during the Sui dynasty, but only in the 7th century during the Tang dynasty did it reach its peak. All because of a monk, Xuanzang, who made a difficult pilgrimage to India by the Silk Road. He returned to Xi'an with sacred texts and translated them. He housed them in this big goose pagoda. A tower similar to the ones he found in India. Tang Empress, the only female ever to rule China, added more stories to the tower. What we see today are the tower, some buildings and images, and displays of Buddha's life. The sacred texts are long gone.
Pagodas are everywhere. Some are unusual. The Yellow Crane Pagoda, landmark of Wuhan, built earlier than the one at Xi'an, is based on a Tao myth, not Buddhist. Another, a 10th century pagoda, sits on top of Tiger Hill. It actually leans like the famous tower at Pisa.
Buddhist temples are everywhere. The central image is of Sakyamuni, the founder of the faith. At the Lingyan temple of Hangzhou, the image is golden. At the Tibetan Lama temple of Beijing, it is a sandalwood carving. And at Shanghai, it is made of jade. In the front hall, we see 2 pairs of devas, guardians of the 4 directions. In the middle sits an image of the laughing Buddha, or Maitreya, the future Buddha. Behind him is a deity, the protector of scriptures. In the main hall, the image of Sakyamuni is flanked by disciples. Along the walls are images of arhats who have attained their salvation. All around are depictions of Buddhist mythology and images resembling Hindu deities with Sanskrit names revealing their origins. The style of worship in all these temples are also remarkably Hindu. Offerings, prayers, and incense sticks.
Of particular interest are images of bodhisattvas, disciples who have stayed their own salvation to save others. One of them is that of Guan Yin, the goddess of mercy, who looks just like the Hindu goddess Lakshmi. She is also portrayed with 1,000 eyes and arms and called Avalokiteshvara, the omniscient one. In the Buddhist caves of India, the same bodhisattva is a he, not a she. In China, the male has been changed to a female.
Caves also served as temples and retreats. At Yangtze, near the Lingyan temple, we saw a few sacred images carved into the sides of a limestone hill. But we saw even more at Dasu Caves near Chongqing. We learned that there are about 50,000 rock-cut images here. The biggest of them is a 30-meter-long prone image of the Buddha as he is watched over by his disciples. Nearby is a huge wheel of the universe reminding us of the cycle of life and death. And the Bodhisattva Guan Yin at her wildest. Colorful arhats stand tall within the rock face and mystic symbolism is everywhere.
The scariest images were those portraying hell. Apparently, there are 18 kinds of hell to punish sinners. And they are ruled by 10 kings. We see them with Buddha seated in between. The Dasu caves present one more perspective. It is also a site where all three systems, Buddhism, Tao, Confucian logic, seem to come together. Their founders, Buddha, Lao Tzu, and Confucius, all contemporaries of the 6th century BCE, were together in shaping the psyche of China.
Didn't China have any other religions?
Yes, they did, but with less impact. The Silk Road also brought Zoroastrianism, Nestorian Christianity, and Islam to Xi'an, or Chang'an as it was known then. In this suburb, Islam has thrived to this day. Life here has always been distinctly different and centered around the community's great mosque. To see the shrine, we pass through a wooden gateway into a garden. The halls and buildings of this mosque is more Chinese than Arabic. With with markers and stelas here and there. An octagonal tower stands out in the middle of the garden in place of a minaret. This site was first built during the Tang dynasty, and more was added until the 14th century. We reach the main prayer hall, but we do not see any traditional Islamic dome on top. This structure is just a pavilion, Chinese style. Entry inside into the prayer hall is forbidden to non-Muslims.
Have we reached the second gorge yet?
Yes, this is it. The second gorge of the Changjiang, the Wuxia or Witch's Gorge, 40 kilometers long. On a clearer day, one should see 12 peaks, each rich in myth. This long river has already traveled 4,500 kilometers from the west to reach this gorge. And it will flow another 1,800 kilometers to reach the Pacific. It is a highway of water to carry men and materials by boats right across China. In the past, they were smaller, slower, and at the mercy of the Yangtze. Today, they are bigger, quicker, and safer.
Were the rivers the only way to travel?
Not really. The Chinese also built canals. At Suzhou, we rode a boat among a maze of narrow waterways. The scenery reminded us of the waterways of Amsterdam and Venice. Venetian Marco Polo must have been nostalgic when he was here 700 years ago. What we now see is the southern end of the Grand Canal of China, which begins in Beijing 4,000 kilometers away. Started as early as the 5th century, it was extended by the Mings 1,000 years later. This canal connects the Yellow River in the north with the delta of the Yangtze in the south. Rice and silk were sent to the north. Wheat, iron and minerals arrived in the south.
What if there were no canals?
Smaller rivers also help to move material. One of them, the Lijiang or Li River, is famous for something else, its unique landscape. To see for ourselves, we joined a convoy of tourist boats from Guilin. We trailed each other along the winding, narrow and shallow stream, while souvenir vendors invaded like pirates. As usual, there was greenery, animals and small villages on either bank. But But the real spectacle was the shapes of hills all around us. Tall, steep, and curvy, their peaks looked like giant misshapen fingers clawing at the sky. Geology names this display as karst, a landscape created by flowing water, dissolving out limestone among rock beds. These misty, surrealistic shapes have been the subject of many myths and an inspiration for poets and artists. After 56 kilometers of such sights, we arrived at the town of Yangtze.
Fubo Hill, a karst rock, sits right in the middle of the city of Guilin. Its caverns below were once useful as Buddhist shrines. Another karst shape is Elephant Trunk Hill, whose form reflects its name. And the city's most spectacular karst hill is in its reed flute cave. Its interior has been sculpted by nature into grotesque chambers, stalactites and stalagmites. It's a site fit for filming The Lord of the Rings.
Not many such shapes around the Shenong stream, a tributary of the Yangtze. We traveled upstream on this river in a small ferry. This gorge is much narrower than the Three Gorges and is also lush with greenery. As steep rock faces pass by, we see macabre coffins on cave ledges, evidence of cultures past. Soon, the stream becomes impossibly narrow and shallow, and we switch to smaller p-boats. Our crew rose furiously against the current. And then, when it got even shallower, pushes us up. The crew catches its breath on a shore as we let downstream boats glide by. Everyone sings, and so does our delightful guide, Jia Lingshe.
东山下雨，西山晴，上河水浅，下河深喂，馨香温美，情深浅喂。
It helps take away the pain of watching trackers strain and stumble as they pull us upstream with ropes.
山沟子水，喂，山沟子水，花不挑迷信，自命那也有。
Soon it was time for us to turn back. And for these men, the journey downstream is welcome relief. The water does all the work now, except the steering. Our exhausted captain breaks into song.
正月谈那是实心年，经过个了一去是大半年。我盼望那一天哦，努的个儿耶，我时时在挂牵哦，哟吼哟耶。2月谈那是百花开，经过个了一去是一不来。有那个别家里哟，努的个儿耶，你才把路留开哟，哟吼哟耶。3月谈那是实情面，经过个的说话是真切，话也说得好哦，努的个儿耶，水也点得灯哦，哟吼哟耶。4月谈那是4月8，经过个的下河是把着王撒，你打一上了别人的狗哦，努的个儿耶，你才把路来丢哦，哟吼哟耶，谢谢。
And Jialing She sings us one more time in Tujia.
个头，一呀个尾巴跟着姐后头，姐往哪里走啊？你拿住姐的手，姐往哪里行啊？你扯住姐罗裙，就是路干盖，
喂，
就是路干盖，
喂，
你快松手啊！姐要往那两家走一走，二呀个凤凰，二呀个头，二呀个尾巴跟着姐后头，姐往哪里走啊？你拿住姐的手，姐往哪里行啊？你扯住
It is the language of a minority group, one of over 50 in the country.
Are we now at the third gorge?
Yes, we are. The Eastern Zealing Gorge. The longest, about 48 kilometers long. Do you see the walkways carved into the cliff's walls? Once they were used by trackers to pull boats through. But by 2009, many such spots will be underwater. So will 8,000 historic and cultural sites, lands and homes. About 1.2 million people will be displaced from here. The heavy rains of today are perhaps a sign of the floods to come.
In 2009, the Yangtze will rise to 176 meters and form a huge reservoir behind a mammoth dam. As we exit this gorge, we see this famous Three Gorges Dam. Its construction is nearly complete. We draw closer, wait our turn near the locks to be lowered across the dam. 2,200 years ago, the first emperor of China built the Great Wall to stop invaders. Today's rulers of China are building a great dam to generate electricity.
Yeah, we hope the dam works. The Great Wall did not. In spite of the wall, the Mongol conqueror Genghis Khan invaded China in the 12th century. His grandson Kublai Khan was the first foreign ruler of China. His dynasty, the Yuans, took over, and Beijing became the country's capital.
These bell and drum towers were built by them. From these towers, chimes of bells and booms of drums broadcast the hours of the day. We climbed hundreds of steep steps into the drum tower and then gasped for breath. Inside, we saw a clepsydra, or a water clock, which counted time. A collection of large drums there announced the hours to the public. Coming down these steps was not for stumblers or the faint of heart.
What happened after the Mongols?
An indigenous Ming dynasty took over. To protect their empire, they extended the Great Wall even further. To protect themselves, they also built a new imperial palace right at the center of Beijing.
We walked to that palace across the well-known Tiananmen Square and past the History Museum, the People's Hall, Mao's Memorial, and a monument to honor China's heroes. Across the busy road stands the Gate of Heavenly Peace, with a picture of Mao, the last uncrowned emperor of China. We walked past a display of cannons to reach the Meridian Gate, the southern entrance to the palace. Once commoners were forbidden from entry. Today, crowds flock into this forbidden city through a large courtyard. They cross a moat which flows under 5 marble bridges and see the majestic Hall of Supreme Harmony atop 3 marble terraces. We see one of the 2 bronze lions on guard. Mythical animal figures adorn the hall's roof ridge to ward off evil. That there are 11 animals signify the importance of this hall.
The emperor conducted his affairs of state from here, seated on its gold-painted throne. Behind this hall is another, the Hall of Medium Harmony, designed for the emperor's rest. It is followed by the Hall of Preserving Harmony, a site for banquets and for examining candidates' entry into the civil service. These 3 halls, one behind another, dominate. Lesser status buildings flank the sides. It is red everywhere, the color for good luck and happiness, and swaths of royal yellow, the color for power and authority. We see dragons, symbols of royalty, turtles, symbols of longevity, and other mythical animals. We also see rows of incense burners and large vats for water. We learned that the style of windows, doors, ceilings and the decor are really markers which define the purpose and status of each structure.
We reach the entrance to the emperor's private quarters. The emperors lived in the first building, the Hall of Heavenly Purity. Next is the Hall of Prosperity, intended for ceremonies. The last of the 3, the Hall of Earthly Peace, housed the emperor's women. Behind all 3 lies the imperial garden, with 2 cypress trees grafted into each other, symbolizing marital union. Steps away are bronzes and pavilions. and one even sits on a rockery. We exit through the northern Senwoman Gate.
There's so much here in this palace. Could you see all of it?
No way. It was just a quick walkthrough. 2 hours are not enough to explore 9,000 buildings and 720,000 square meters. The Mings ruled from here for 276 years. They were followed by a foreign dynasty, the Manchurian Qings. They reigned until 1911.
Did this emperor ever go out of the palace?
Every winter solstice, he prayed at the Temple of Heaven. This complex is a long corridor of squares, symbols for Earth, inset with tiers of circular platforms, symbols of heaven. On this round altar, the emperor used to offer sacrifices. Further down the corridor is an enclosure. An imperial vault within serves as a memorial for ancestors. The circular barrier is called the echo wall as it reflects sounds, even whispers. At the end of the corridor sits the Hall of Prayer for Good Harvest, the main building of the site. We did not get to see its Hall of Prayer, from which the emperor got his mandate to rule China. It was renovation time.
The emperors also visited their imperial garden at Kunming Lake near Beijing. Its landmark is the pagoda on top of its Longevity Hill. This garden is rich with lotus ponds, pavilions, and rock sculptures. In the distance, one can spot a 17-arc bridge. We walk along the long corridor, a gallery of ornamentation. Though started 800 years ago, this garden was destroyed twice by Anglo-French forces in the 19th century during the Opium Wars. It was rebuilt and renamed as the New Summer Palace by Empress Cixi, the last of the Qing dynasty. She also built a boat of marble with stone paddle wheels. It will be an eternal memorial to this last Qing ruler.
After they died, both Ming and Qing emperors were buried in impressive tombs. We visited Dingling, one of the Ming tombs near Beijing. In its big museum hall, we see an image of the 16th century Ming Emperor Sanzong, with spirit money offerings at his feet. We also see many other artifacts obtained from his grave. Crowns, one traditional, one of gold and one shaped like a phoenix, as well as robes, weapons, and armor. We walked past ceremonial gates and climbed to the Soul Tower. Below this memorial stela lies a large circular mound with the underground palace storing his remains and his needs for an afterlife.
We are also past all three gorges. In a few hours, we will be lowered downstream in 4 steps by the locks of the dam. We will moor at the town of Sandoping. From a tower, we get an overview of the dam and see the rush of water below. In a museum, you also see its model. This dam will yield 84.6 billion kilowatts of electricity, the dream of today's rulers of China.
What did China do before this dam?
Used coal for heat and power. But there is another 20-year-old dam downstream at the end of this 4th gorge, the western ceiling. It yields only about 16 billion kilowatts of electricity. We also pass through this Getsoba Dam. And reach the calmer section of the Yangtze.
Soon we reached Wuhan, our cruise destination. We are back to the point where we started. So, there you are. That's the end of our story.
Wait. Tell me what you liked most, Pots and Tuts.
For me, it was the private gardens of Hangzhou and Suzhou. Hangzhou has its beautiful West Lake, and Suzhou its remarkable canals. But their gardens are something else. Trees, shrubs and flowers is an obvious first element in their gardens. Flowing water with life and lotus forms a second element. Limestone rock forms are everywhere as the third element. And pavilions with their airy wooden architecture, framed leek windows, traditional decor, and balconies is the fourth element. So 4 elements are blended harmoniously to meet one's needs. Imagine living here, walking about on paths with embedded symbolism, and walking through moon gates. Anjali, I would have loved to live here, like those rich gentlemen scholars of the past.
What about you, Potts? What did you like?
For me, it's a hard choice because there are so many things here. I like the temples, pagodas, and icons. It reminded me so much of India. So much to see, but so little time. On the other hand, China is not just a dream anymore. It has become real to me. I am sure that our fellow travelers, Claire and Bob, Natty and Harry would agree. It was a trip of a lifetime. and a fulfillment of nagging curiosity.
Is it time to see the dance again?
Let's do it!